Hello, and welcome to the All Things Narrative podcast, where we explore the relationships between the stories we love and the stories we live. I'm your host, Derek Hatch, and let's get started. What's up, everybody out there? I am so excited today because I am sitting down with somebody that we've just recently become acquainted, but I am just so incredibly drawn to. He has so much wisdom and knowledge just about all things Judaism and the Bible, and I've learned a lot from him and just enjoyed our conversations. I actually got to go be on his YouTube channel just the week leading up to New Year's Eve, and it was just a wonderful time to get to just connect with him, and just, you know, he graciously let me come on and share my story, and we just had a lot of conversations, and now I kind of want to do the same thing for him as well. And so this is Jacob. Is it Faturechi? Is that how you say your last name?
Faturechi, yeah.
Faturechi, perfect. And so I'm just honored to have you on here and just to get to hear your story, as much or as little as you want to share. But welcome to the All Things Narrative podcast.
Thank you so much. I plagiarize a lot of wisdom. I like to say,
don't we all?
That. I like to say, I no matter how tall you are, you will never be as tall as somebody who stands on the shoulder of giants. And so, I am glad I have been able to plagiarize things you found wise.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about all these conversations that we have on the podcast with story, is that story is such an ancient and universal thing, you know? So when we talk about the elements of story, when we talk about patterns and themes and all this stuff, we're not reinventing the wheel. You know, we're not coming up with something brand new in the 21st century. This is stuff that goes back like so far. And that's what I love about like people like Joseph Campbell, that really they write these great works that kind of help us to see this common language across space and time and cultures and different circumstances, that there's just this universality of storytelling. And so it's just great to have someone on here who I know just appreciates stories, and you have a lot of great stories as well. So looking forward to hearing those.
I love telling stories, and I guess my channel is so I don't like calling the Bible a book. I think the Bible is a library.
Yeah, I say the same thing.
And yeah, it has so many stories in it of different types. Yeah. Stories are how we understand things, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's how we make sense of the world, and how we make sense of our place in it. So part of what we do on this podcast is we explore stories that inspire us, that influence us, whether it be in, films or novels, whether it be in something like the Bible. But today, I actually want to hear your real life story, because I've gotten these like little glimmers and pieces of it, and I'm like, okay, I think there's something here that is very profound and inspiring, especially for someone like me who, I've grown up here in America. In comparison to be honest, in comparison with the world, it's a very comfortable life in a lot of ways. Yeah. So Jacob, take us back. Where does your story start? Where do you come from? And what's kind of your origin story, if you will?
Sure. So my grandmother, her first language that she spoke to my father is Aramaic. And her family is, she passed recently, but her family are one of the very few people who still speak Aramaic in the world as a first language. So my family, at least that section of it, has been living on the rivers of Babylon quite likely since the Babylonian captivity.
Oh,
so
wow.
over 2,000 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Quite likely. At least that community was really established when there was at least 1,000 years ago. And so I was born in Iran, and being Jewish in Iran, so I was born about 2 years before the revolution in Iran, the Islamic Revolution.
Okay.
And that precipitated the Iran-Iraq War, which was a very bloody war. I generally, while I am pretty open with the kinds of trauma that I underwent as a child, I actually usually don't talk about it with people because it's too much.
Yep, I totally understand.
And so a lot of the very worst things that can happen to a child during a period of revolution. And so I'll tell you a story. I was walking down the street with my dad, and I must have been only, 5 or 6 years old. And in Tehran, the houses all have very high walls out to the street, so that when you're walking down the street, you don't actually see any of the houses. You only see walls. Okay. Because of privacy concerns, nobody should be looking into your home. Nobody should even see your garden, really. And so it's very different from how the streets look here. And we were walking down the street, and we got to a house that the wall, which usually provides privacy, had been bulldozed. And not only that, but the facade of their home had been bulldozed. So it kind of like when you look at a dollhouse that has a cutaway. Yes. So they had, so somebody had bulldozed the actual facade of the thing as well. I mean, you have to understand how in a society like Persian society, this is just pure humiliation. Wow. Right? Yeah. And I asked my dad what was going on, and he just said they're Baha'i. So the religious police in Iran, there isn't a lot of accountability. There are people who do all kinds of things with their authority, and being Baha'i in Iran. So I have family who are Baha'i, and it's a religion that was established in Iran out of Islam some 100 years ago, and they're considered heretics to Islam. And so in Iran, they technically have no legal protections, and so they also can't go to university, because when you apply, you have to say which religion you are. Yeah. And there's only 4 choices: Christian, Zoroastrian, Jewish, or Muslim. And if you don't check one of the boxes, you don't get to go to college. Wow. Yeah. Wow. So actually, one of my cousins teaches an online university for people in Iran who are Baha'i, so that they can get a higher education. But there really was a lack of civilization in one of the oldest civilizations in the world, that when I came to the United States, I often envied my friends their sort of naivete. When you see the police in the United States, you may not have the greatest view of them, but it's not even comparable to the type of abuse of authority that's just a given in Iran. Here in the United States, at the very least, if a policeman is misbehaving, there's a standard by which that is considered misbehavior.
Yeah.
But my father, he was so the first time we tried to leave Iran, we got caught, and my father was arrested, and there was a kind of trial where he didn't even have an attorney, where he was convicted of being a Zionist spy.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and we my family, my mom and my grandmother were very, very concerned that he would be executed. And this was one of the many things that happened as a child. So when I came to the United States, I am very enthusiastically American. One of the highlights of my life really was when I became a citizen of the United States. And I have a deep appreciation for just the level of civilization that a lot of us take for granted.
Yeah.
And I mean, anybody who's paying attention to the situation in Iran right now, it's just wild. It's just wild. I don't even know what to say. Yeah.
Can I, so I gotta, there's a lot there to kind of dig into and unpack. So help us, just for any one of us who might not know. So you're Jewish and you're living in Iran. You're growing up in Iran. What's the percentage of the population in Iran that's Jewish?
Way under 1%.
Okay.
So
like the minority of the minority of the minority, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as you're on the heels of this Islamic Revolution and that's all taking place, because you guys have been there for a long, long time, many, many generations. So was there a change in how your family was looked at, how you were treated, in just what day-to-day life was like?
Yeah, so under the Shah and the first Shah, Pahlavi Shah, was about 100 years ago, Reza Shah. And during World War II, actually, so the name Iran, Iran used to go by Persia.
Right.
But during World War II, they actually decided to be known internationally as Iran, kind of to curry favor with the Nazis. That was a deliberate consideration that they had in starting to use the word Iran. So being like the name Aryan is actually a very common name in Iran.
Oh, interesting.
Because being like Iran is very proud of its Aryan heritage, and there's nothing wrong with that. That it's not anything like the type of Aryan heritage that they didn't even have an Aryan heritage really during World War II with the Nazis. But so when the British and the Russians occupied Iran during World War II, they deposed the Shah, sent him into exile, and chose one of his sons to kind of be a puppet.
Yeah.
And this is Mohammed Shah.
Okay.
And he was very, very Western. And he tried to be very Western, and he tried, in a sense, to be liberal.
Okay.
But so a lot of people, when they look at the hijab and women wearing a veil, it is so highly politicized in Iran, partially because during the time of Reza Shah and Mohammad Shah, there was an attempt to secularized,
Mm-hmm.
which included not just allowing women to walk around without a veil,
Mm-hmm.
but actually prohibiting it in public buildings. And there was apparently a time when they would force men, they would not give paychecks to men until their wives came unveiled to pick them up.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's complete change then.
Yeah. Right. And so there was a reaction. So the Islamic Revolution, there was a pendulum swing.
Right.
In fact, there's a reason why the veil is so politicized in Iran, and many people actually see it as a sort of flag of independence and being against Western values.
Yeah.
And that's why it is such a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is everybody talking about the veil? You know, in the United States, a woman can decide to wear a veil or not.
Yeah.
In Iran, there was a lot of pressure for women not to wear the veil, and then there was the legal requirement. I remember my sister as a little kid being forced to be veiled to go to school, and it's like under the Shah, that was never required of Jews and Muslim and Christians
Mm-hmm.
and Zoroastrians. It was a Muslim thing that some Muslims decided to do.
Mm-hmm.
But underneath the Islamic Republic, it became compulsory on all women, including little girls, to wear the veil.
Yeah. And is there any hostility that you're experiencing?
Well, I mean, there definitely was this idea of, so Iran and basically all the Muslim countries in the Middle East use Zionism as a scapegoat.
Okay.
So it's, when things are going very badly in Iran, suddenly it becomes a huge focus, what's going on in Israel. And, it's really an attempt to distract things through anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of, for example, my father was convicted of being a Zionist spy. It's like, what does that even mean? And they apparently convicted some 2,000 to 3,000 people, including a friend of mine who was 14 years old, of being a Zionist spy.
Wow.
So, that scapegoat mechanism.
Yes.
And I mean, I have to say, there is an ongoing genocide of Christians in Muslim countries. And so also the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians, there is a sense of separateness and blame, and it wasn't everybody. It's not everybody. But again, when you're living in a society that the rules aren't well known, and that's part of what happened with the revolution, right? Some of my family these days, they tell me, oh, you just remember Iran during the revolution. Things have really quieted down. And I suppose that's possible, but like, anytime you have a revolution, you have everything that was going on, including the war, the Iran-Iraq war, was brutal, absolutely brutal, and a very long war. It it throws all of society into upheaval.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am sure, like, even today, the effects are still being felt of everything that happened decades ago. So how did you get out, and how old were you when you got out?
I was 6 going on 7.
Oh, wow.
So the first time we tried to leave, we tried hiring coyotes, and that didn't work out. And the second time, so in Iran, children share a passport with their mother.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently my parents bribed somebody to get a passport for my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to leave Iran just on an airplane.
Oh, wow.
I remember my parents, because I was so young, they were afraid I would say something. So they didn't tell me what was going on until basically the day we were going to the airport.
Wow.
They suddenly told me, "Oh, we're going to the airport, and we're gonna." And my parents had to basically sit me down, and because we were going to get questioned
mm-hmm.
as we're leaving. There's a search. And so my parents had to sit me down and kind of like train me. They basically said, just don't say anything. When people ask you questions, just don't say anything.
Okay.
And because I was only 6.
Right.
And I remember the process of like going through the search, and getting on that airplane to Turkey, which is where we applied for asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And it took about 8 months for the asylum process
mm-hmm.
before we got to the United States. And once we got to the United States, then my father also, he did the coyote thing. He actually walked for 3 days. They would sleep during the days and walk during the nights. And so there's a hilly portion of Iran between Turkey and Iran where he walked past it.
So he got out at a different time than you?
Yes.
Okay. What was it like, how long after you guys? So
he left as soon as we were safely in the United States.
Okay.
And so he showed up. He ended up coming here, I believe, like 4 or 5 months after we did.
Okay. So you got to Turkey, and how long were you in Turkey before you got to the United States?
So 6 months in Turkey, and then we got accepted to a refugee program, which took us to Italy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in Italy for 2 months, and then we came to the United States.
Okay. Now you're in Turkey, and you're in this period of waiting. Was the United States always the end goal to get to?
Well, I mean, the question was United States, somewhere else. Apparently, we have some family in Canada, and there was a time when it was looking like we were going to go to Canada, and I sometimes wonder like how different my life would have been.
Sure.
There was also possibly the option of going to Israel, but a lot of our family had come to the United States. Los Angeles has a very large expatriates population of so like a lot of the Persian Jewish community ended up moving to Los Angeles.
Okay.
Partially because a lot of those people moved to Los Angeles before, like there was a community that came before the revolution.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so, kind of people bringing family over and so Los Angeles, I mean, I live not very far from Little Tehran.
So you had family that was here already. Yeah. And so, I mean, when you were, before you even got here, like when you're in Turkey, you're in a new country for 6 months. you just found out as you were like getting ready to come over here that, oh, hey, by the way, we're not going back. So if you can recall, like, what was going on in your 6-year-old mind while you were there?
Well, I mean, it was a scary time, partially because as children we look towards our parents.
Yeah.
And you know, my father wasn't there, and my mom was very worried because we only had the money that she was able to bring out with us until we got accepted into the refugee program. So my mom was very concerned and was trying to save as much money as possible while we were in Turkey. When we finally got to Rome, it was a lot more relaxed because my mom then didn't have to worry about running out of money.
Okay.
And so we ended up actually touring a lot while those 2 months we were in Rome. Yeah.
And then you get to LA, and
I'll tell you another story.
Yeah.
So Persian culture, there's this thing called tarof, which is kind of like a polite negotiation when you go to somebody's house. And so when somebody offers you something, you're supposed to say no, and then they offer it again, and you're supposed to say no, and then, you know, so it's like this social dance that you go through. And when we came to Los Angeles, one of my dad's aunts, we went over to her house, and she had been living in the United States for a very long time. She said, she brought out a tray of cookies, and she said, "This is America. We don't do taro. I'm going to leave this on the table. If you want, you're going to take. If you don't take, I'm not gonna force it on you, and you're not gonna get any." And that's all she said.
Yeah.
And you know, 6-year-old me and 8-year-old my sister didn't know how to take that. Yeah. And we're sitting there with that tray of cookies there, and of course, we didn't take any because it's like she's supposed to offer, right?
Yeah.
and she's supposed to do this taro thing. And that was a lesson that I really learned about the United States. Like just sitting there, and then when we left, it was like, oh, if she really meant it. If I don't take the cookie, I wasn't going to get a cookie.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Were there any other sort of kind of cultural things that were maybe surprising or shocking to you in those first days, weeks, months that you were here?
Well, one of the things that was actually most shocking, we went to the grocery store, and the oranges didn't have any dirt on them.
Oh.
And it was like, and we're looking at this supermarket, and it's like nothing I had ever seen, right? When you go to the greengrocers in Iran, certainly, and even in Europe, so there's a butcher shop, and there's a greengrocer, and there's all these small shops. And when you go to the greengrocer, like the greengrocer doesn't spend his time like polishing the oranges the way supermarkets do in the United States. And the fact that people would buy individual oranges as opposed to like buying them by the pound, there were a lot of things which were very different between Iran and the United States. I mean, the culture shock was huge.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't even enumerate all of them.
And
But it was a different lifestyle.
What year was it that you got here?
1985.
1985. Okay. Was there anything, cause you mentioned earlier that there was kind of like a secularization kind of trying to happen over there in Iran. So were there any things that like you kind of got a little taste of that were Western while you were in Iran, but then you came to America and you kind of saw the full extent of?
Well, I remember, so the attempts to Westernize were before the revolution. So I was only 2 years old when the revolution happened. So VCRs were considered contraband in Iran.
Oh, interesting.
And videos and things were you black market, right?
Wow.
So supposedly backgammon was considered bad, which is funny because it's like a Persian tradition because people would gamble on it.
Yeah.
And so it was prohibited as gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And VCRs, because the videos, well, I guess it wasn't so much the VCR itself, because if you had allowed the type of things that were allowed, that's fine. But I remember in Iran watching a lot of Benny Hinn because
interesting.
Because Benny Hinn has a lot of things that it doesn't matter. You just watch him running around doing things. There's a lot of physical comedy.
Yeah.
And I remember we used to watch a lot of Bollywood stuff in Iran, but all of this was kind of contraband. And then actually going to movie theaters and what was on the televisions in the United States and in Europe, like it was completely different. And I have to say, I almost think it was, I think there was a problem with me personally as a child, like watching a lot of, not adult movies, but movies that weren't appropriate for my age, because my parents really didn't understand what was, I mean, especially before my dad got here. But once my dad got here, he started at, regulating what we were watching and bedtimes and stuff. But those first few months, my mom wasn't sure what to do with it. Like, this is just television and people are watching television,
Yeah.
And so it's a very different type of society where you have to have parental controls than one where you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, ever since then, it's just gotten crazier and crazier, right?
Well, yeah, to some extent, I guess. Yeah, especially with the internet.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about what it was like for you being, coming from Iran and being here in America. What was it like cultivating, and growing up in the Jewish faith in LA, as your family's trying to start again?
Yeah, so I actually think part of my Jewish identity and personally being more attached to Judaism was in reaction to just, I guess, kind of the freedom in the United States.
Yeah.
American identity lets you be whatever kind of American you want. And so you have to ask yourself, what kind of American do you want to be?
Yeah.
And so I got very, very involved in Judaism, and I became very observant to the point where my parents were like, they were very unhappy with me being as observant of Jewish law as I was.
Interesting.
And I think, well, first of all, that came as a total surprise to me. I never I never anticipated it. But second, I think for them, there was an association between religion and the Islamic Revolution and religious extremism, that they would just apply across the board.
Yeah.
And what I'm telling my parents is like, no, you can't, like, as an extreme Jew, like, I'm not going to go and do a suicide bombing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to spend a lot of time studying Talmud.
Yeah. So it was definitely not what they were maybe expecting. They
definitely not. My father actually told me. So after college, I went to Israel to study at a yeshiva, and my parents came and visited me. And my dad told me that when we had first came to the United States, one of the local, Jewish schools had offered free tuition, and he had gone and visited the school, and he had seen the kids all wearing yarmulkes and tzitzit, which are the fringes that they wear, and running around. And he said he decided, that's not what I want for my son. And when he was saying this, like, I was in Jerusalem at a religious school wearing a yarmulke and tzitzit, and for him it was kind of like, I guess it wasn't up to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you found your way there no matter what, even though he wasn't, wanting you to go in that direction. Yeah, that's interesting. So in college, you were studying a lot, it sounds like.
I learned a lot about Judaism in college, but you have to also understand that we didn't have the same resources then that everybody has now, right?
Yeah.
So these days, there are websites like Safaria and Chabad.org, and like there's so much about Judaism that's freely available that just did not exist. And I was trying to learn more about Judaism, but I was also, in a particular environment. There weren't really. So when I went to USC in undergrad, there wasn't an Orthodox rabbi at all, and I was one of the few students who started wearing a yarmulke on campus. And there's actually, like, one of my claim to fame is the Los Angeles Jewish Journal, when my rabbi, who ended up opening the only Orthodox synagogue at USC, when they were doing an article about it, they started off the article with me talking about how I had been, I was riding my bike on Fraternity Row, and I was wearing a yarmulke, and a drunk frat guy at on top of one of the Jewish frats yelled out, "Look, there's a Jew." It was just that strange to see somebody wearing a yarmulke.
Wow.
At USC at the time.
Yeah.
This was 1996, 97.
Yeah.
And now it's just so much more common, but it wasn't something that you really saw.
Yeah. So, as you've experienced different things in different places, you've lived in Iran, you were in Turkey, you were in Rome. It sounds like you were in, did I hear you say that you were in Jerusalem as well?
So after college, after undergrad, I went to a year to study in a yeshiva in Jerusalem.
Okay, yeah. and then of course LA, where you are now. As you've moved in these different seasons in these different places, have there been any particular stories that have really sustained you through all these changes, that have really that you've held on to, that have been particularly meaningful to you, just as you've been learning how to cultivate and explore and enter into further your Jewish identity within the midst of so much change?
So I'll tell you my favorite story that a rabbi once told and just stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I've told you this story many times already. But there's a young man who learns of a fruit that is...
Oh, well, this is a good one.
That has a taste unlike anything he has ever tasted before. Yeah. And he decides that he's going to go out in search of this fruit. Mm-hmm. And so he goes to city after city, wise man after wise man, hermits, nomads. He goes and he spends basically his entire life on this search for that tree. And eventually he actually arrives at the tree, and there's a fruit there, and he takes it and he tastes it, and he feels that all those years of his life, that now he's an old man, were worth everything he went through to get there. Yeah. And while he's savoring that fruit, a little child walks up to the tree and grabs a fruit and starts eating it. And he wonders, he says to the child, "How'd you get here so young? I spent all my life trying to get here." Yeah. And the child says, "I was born here." And for me, that's really meaningful, because I think all of us have a journey from where we were born to where we will end up. And there are a lot of things I wish I had known when I was younger that I try to impart to my nephews, for example. I tell them an intelligent man learns from his mistakes. A wise man learns from other people's mistakes. It's really nice to be that child who was born at the foot of that tree, but then the question becomes, what becomes your adventure? Yeah. Right? Yeah. What are you going to spend your life doing? And can the fruit taste as sweet to that child as it does to the man who spent his whole life getting there? Yeah.
I love that story. I've heard you tell it a couple times, and it connects with me so well, because you know quite a bit of my story now, and you know that's been a lot of my journey too, is not growing up with a lot of the things that are important to me, particularly when it comes to God and faith, and then coming to find that and go through just sometimes a really painful journey to get to where some people just that's their starting place, Like, I think my wife is one of those people that she was the kid there at the tree, she's had a very good foundation in those things at a young age. So yeah, where are you at now? So what is, I know you're still living in LA, but what's this chapter of your story that you're in, like, for you now?
So, I had a lot of difficulty in living an Orthodox Jewish lifestyle and maintaining a relationship with my family and making everything work. And there were several things that at one point I decided, okay, this is not what God intended for me. And I didn't know what God intended for me. And so I dropped basically all Jewish observance completely.
Oh, wow.
And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to concentrate on other things. I'm going to concentrate on building my life, on being healthy and all things like that. And so I went on this journey of self-improvement, which led me to Jordan Peterson,
Yep.
who and it wasn't because of anything religious. It was because he was this psychologist who was. So I was getting involved because of the psychological community.
Yeah.
The funny thing was that, well, a lot of people were just embarking on a journey of discovery of the Bible and religion in general.
Yeah.
And I found myself in this place where I never would be. I can guarantee you that if I had the life that I thought I was going to make for myself, I would not be having this conversation with you.
Yeah.
I would not have my YouTube channel or anything like that. And I found myself in a place, I kind of feel like Jonah, that this fish swallowed me up and took me somewhere I didn't want to go.
Wow.
And spat me out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I am right now, is for the last 2-3 years, I've become kind of a resource about theology and Hebrew and Judaism and everything around that in ways I never imagined I would become. And especially while there are some Jews in this little corner of the internet, I'm making good friends with Catholic priests and Eastern Orthodox priests and Calvinist pastors and all these people that, frankly, Judaism is rather insular. We don't evangelize. We don't believe in disrupting other people's religious journeys, and we believe that that's part of having faith in God, is recognizing that God Himself is guiding other people. In our communities, we are involved with our own community and building our religious faith within Judaism. But there really has not been, until very recently, any type of Jewish resources available to Gentiles.
Right.
And I find myself at the forefront of that.
Yeah. And that's how I found you. And that's why I reached out to you in the first place. Was I sensed that you would be approachable, that you would be somebody that, as someone who was non-Jewish and has some Jewish ancestry and had a lot of questions about that I could ask it, and not feel weird about it. Which is awesome, because I was looking for that for a long time. So it sounds like there's just a really unique calling that you have right now. And that, would that be a fair way to put it?
I hope so. I hope so. I sometimes wonder if I'm not kind of kidding myself by saying that, even though I don't live an observant Jewish lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I am making Torah available to, including certainly Jews
Mm-hmm.
who otherwise would not have access, but also Noahides.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's the Noahide movement, which so it's really crazy trying to explain it even to other Jews.
Yeah.
A Noahide is an Orthodox Jewish Gentile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah.
And it kind of does, because before Christianity, there were, we know there were Gentiles who believed in the God of Israel without wanting to join the community of Israel.
Right. Well, you had I know some people have called them, what is it, God-fearers or something like that.
God-fearers.
And
that's how it's referred to in the book of Acts, I believe.
Yeah, and there's even, isn't there even like in the temple, was in there like a court of the Gentiles where they could be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Judaism, I mean, I have to say, Judaism has always been a universal religion. We believe that there is one God, and he's the God of all people. That doesn't mean everybody needs to be Jewish. And in fact, it means most people will not be Jewish. It actually says that in Deuteronomy. It says you are a small nation.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we have this concept of Israel as a nation of priests.
Yeah.
But it was never an attempt to impose Judaism on other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically we didn't bother other people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, so 50 years ago, there were no Noahides.
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years ago, there were Noahides. 50 years ago, between the advent of Christianity and the 1970s,
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, being a Noahide was not an option.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because who would want to be a Gentile whose religion is Judaism?
Mm-hmm.
But now, there are estimates. The best estimates we have are there are 100,000 Noahides.
Wow!
And when you consider that, if you're very generous as to the Orthodox Jewish population in the world, it's like 2 million.
Yeah,
you're talking about a growing population that's getting to be as large, if not larger, than the number of Jews who are observant of Orthodox Judaism.
Yeah.
You know, most Jews in the United States, they go to Reform and conservative synagogues.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just become a very strange place to be trying to guide people who come with questions about Judaism. That Judaism, unfortunately, the rabbis have not been discussing the practical implications of what it means to be an Orthodox Jewish Gentile.
Yeah. Well, why this might be a loaded question, but why do you think this is happening like all of a sudden in the last 50 years?
I have to say, I always turn to that verse in Zechariah, which says 10 men of each nation will grab a Jew by the fringes of his garment and say, we have heard God is with all of you. We want to go with you.
Wow.
And in my life, I am seeing that being fulfilled.
Yeah.
One of the rabbis who is very prominent in this field, he says he he receives emails on a daily basis. People saying, Rabbi, I just want to hold on to your tzitzis, right? I just want to hold on to the garment, the corner of your garment, referencing that verse.
Right.
So so I'll tell you another story. There's a monastery not too far from, his name is Rabbi Skobak. He lives in Canada. He's one of the few rabbis who are very involved in the Noahide movement. Okay. And so he got this call from a monk in a cloistered monastery. So a cloistered monastery basically are people who shut themselves off from the world.
Yeah.
They go into this monastery and rarely leave it, rarely talk to anybody unless people come visit the monks, right? And he gets a call from a monk in one of these monasteries who says, Rabbi, I have to see you. Rabbi Skobak.
Wow.
What? and so he went and he's like, the monk said, I can't talk on the phone. I need you to come visit me at the monastery. And so he goes and he visits this monk in his cell in a cloistered monastery. And he says, I want to become Jewish.
Wow.
And Rabbi Skobak is like, why? And he says, because we recite the entirety of the book of Psalms every day at this monastery.
Yeah.
And the longest chapter in the entirety of the Bible is what's called an eightfold acrostic.
Is that Psalm 119?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So an eightfold acrostic. So acrostic poems in Hebrew are poems that start with a letter of the alphabet, right? So, first one starts with A, first B, then B, then C, then D, right? The equivalent in Hebrew. And Psalm 119 is an eightfold acrostic. So 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, and it's 176 pages, verses. Yeah. And all of these verses are about how beautiful God's law is and how it improves you and your life and everything. And he said, I just read it over and over and over again. And I asked myself, why aren't I keeping them?
Yeah. Wow. So when you hear about stories like this and you kind of look at what's going on, because I feel like I just, even reflecting in the last month, it's been interesting to see. On the one hand, there's been I'm hearing more about antisemitism happening in the media. I mean, there's the whole Kanye West thing and just other circumstances as well. And then on the other side, I think about my kindergarten, daughter is learning Hanukkah songs in elementary school, which that was not a thing at all when I was in school, and so it's I'm seeing it's something interesting happening just culturally. So what do you kind of see in terms of just here in America, in the West in general, our relationship with Judaism?
I should give a warning, which a lot of people find surprising, which is philosemitism, which is a love of Jews as Jews, is a form of anti-Semitism.
Interesting, yeah.
Because it fetishizes Jews, right? There are a lot of Jewish people who, unfortunately, are not very good people.
Mm.
There are a lot of Jewish people who are amazingly good people.
Yeah.
Right. And when you talk about the Jews,
Mm.
there was a model who got into trouble for saying something anti-Semitic, and she tweeted out, "I love the Jews." And it's like, really? You love the Jews? Have you met like the Jews? That there are all kinds of Jews in the world.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the rise in anti-Semitism has come from an unfortunate. So I think postmodernism
Mm-hmm.
has taught at least some people, especially people who are involved in critical race theory
Mm-hmm.
and similar critical theories, to view people as only their various identities.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Jacob is a Jew, and Jacob is an American, and Jacob is a Persian, and Jacob is... And the fact is, Jacob is a person.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And wherever you go, you're going to find out that all the people there are human beings.
Mm.
And that's one of the most disappointing things you can ever discover. Because you go on these pilgrimages, right? And you can't... Israel was beautiful, and I loved so much of it.
Mm-hmm. But
even in the yeshivas where people were trying to live holy lives and concentrating, really, really concentrating on improving themselves and making themselves better people,
mm-hmm.
they were still people.
Yeah.
And so I think anytime we view people as representatives of others,
mm-hmm.
anytime we give credence to these ideas that a human being is simply a result of the systems that produce them, as opposed, in this mechanistic view, as opposed to seeing individual human beings as individual people.
Right.
You actually, that's why you're seeing both more philosemitism and more anti-Semitism. And I think just in general, we're seeing a lot more racism, because a lot of people are deliberately being racist in the name of being anti-racist.
Yeah.
And they're just flips. It's wrong. It's silly to say I don't see race. Obviously, when I came to the United States and I saw the first Black person, it was different than what I had experienced.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if I see that person as merely a representative of the African American community,
mm-hmm.
I am denying that person's story, that person's individual life, right?
Yeah, preach it.
And I have gotten to know lots and lots of different people from different backgrounds. And I was just speaking yesterday to somebody who's a Latino minister, and he said, these people gave me a grant to start a church, and because I am Latino, they just assumed that I agree with a lot of the woke things, not understanding that no, actually, I am one person with and this has become a common thing for people to assume that, for example, Latinos would be like the term Latinx.
Yeah.
And they hate it. Or American Indians, right? A lot of people want to say Native Americans because they want to be kind and, and that's all nice and good. But American Indians prefer the term Indian. And so if it's about what you wanting to be nice without actually caring. Okay, I'll tell one last story. A rabbi walks into a cafeteria and he sees one of the students there gorging himself on fish. And, he's just eating away at all this fish. And he turns and he goes to the student and he says, "What are you doing?" And the student says, "I can't help myself. I love fish." And the rabbi says, "No, you don't love fish. If you loved fish, you would buy an aquarium. You love eating fish. You love how fish makes you feel.
Yeah.
And you love yourself with the fish."
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
And if we're using other people to love ourselves in a narcissistic way, as opposed to genuinely asking that person, what do they want? What do they need? Right?
Yeah.
Then we're just being narcissistic.
Wow. And that's something that you just, you're not going to hear a lot of people own up to right now. So, but that's good. That's good. And these are like little, it's like little parables, that have so much weight in what you're sharing. So yeah, no, that's good. I love that. The last question that I've just kind of been thinking about, I ask it to a lot of my guests, is if we were using this conversation as a basis for writing a book about your life, like maybe you get a chance to write your autobiography, what would the title be and why?
Good question. I have been working on a communal organization and getting it put together.
Yeah.
And the question became what to name it. And I decided to name it Em Habanim Smecha, the joyful mother of children. Comes from a verse in the Bible. I don't remember the Hebrew of the entire verse off the top of my head, but it says, the barren woman became the joyful mother of children. Hallelujah. And, I never imagined 10, 20 years ago, certainly, and certainly not 30 years ago, that I would not be married, I would not have children. But my life has taken a different route, and it's borne fruit of the mother of children. That's a reference to the Shekhinah. You would call it the Holy Spirit in Judaism, right? And the fruits of the Spirit. It's I would say in my story, when the fruit that I've been looking for, the tree that I have found is very, very different from anything I imagined.
Yeah.
But the fruits are sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's what good stories are made of, though, is finding the unexpected and us growing into who we're meant to be in that journey.
Yeah. A story that doesn't have an arc that we don't learn. So one of the big differences between what Judaism teaches and what a lot of Christianity, at least in the United States, teaches, is there is this idea of getting saved, right? Yeah. And that's the most important thing, right? And, Constantine waited until his deathbed to get baptized because there was this idea some people had, which was baptism would remove all your sins from before you got baptized, but not after.
Oh, interesting. And
he had some sinning to do, and so he was waiting.
To say the least. To say the least.
But the Jewish idea is that life exists in order to teach us a lesson, to help us know God and turn towards God and walk towards God. And so religion shouldn't be a destination. It should be a path.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you are turning towards an infinite God and you are a finite person, you're never going to reach God because he is infinite. But you can walk closer and closer. And that's why so the Mishnah says, and this is a famous section of the Mishnah called Sayings of the Fathers. It says, better is an hour in the world to come than this entire life. And better is an hour of repentance in this life than the entire world to come.
Oh, interesting.
Because the world to come, when that veil is going to be taken off from our eyes, and like it says, the knowledge of God will cover the earth as the waters cover the seas. At that point, we don't have the opportunity to do the type of work on ourselves. There will not be learning, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things. I mean, Jeremiah says about, I will make with you, I would translate, a renewed covenant. And it says what that would be, that it would be inscribed on your hearts, on everyone from the least to the greatest. Yeah. But it gives a detail there that a lot of, I think especially Christians, gloss over. It says, and no one shall have to teach his brother to know God.
Yeah. Yes.
And so when we look forward to the world to come, the Messianic era, yes, it will be great and it will be beautiful, but it will also be a time when there's nothing more to learn. And we live this life. We are walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And in order for us to learn and grow and become better than we were.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it's all about at the end of the day, is we talk about this a lot on this podcast as well. It's just, what are we doing right here and right now? And what would it look like if we viewed our lives through that lens of story? And we know that characters in stories are meant to be dynamic. They are meant to change and transform and grow as they go through the journey. And so what are we doing to be intentional about that? Are we willing to undergo such a process and such a journey, as painful as it might be at times, to go through the valley of the shadow of death? So I would love to have you back on sometime, Jacob, to actually just kind of talk about, the Hebrew Bible, and to talk about, for our listeners, just a lot of the rich depth of what you know about it. And so if people do want to get more connected with you, where can they find you?
I have a YouTube channel, excuse me. It's just my last name. You can find my details, you can find my cell phone number just by Googling my last name. So I am a pretty open and available person. And so I invite anybody who's interested. I have just chatting live streams on my channel on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And people are welcome to just drop in, where we have a weekly Bible study on Wednesdays now. Mm-hmm. That, we talk about whatever people want to talk about.
Yeah.
And anybody can drop in.
Yeah. Well, and you've created space, right? You've created a space where people can come and gather and have meaningful conversations about different things. And that's what I think is a good overlap between what we're doing, because this is what I try to do as well with All Things Narrative. Is we say that we're creating spaces for stories to be told and stories to be lived more meaningfully. And so trying to explore how to do that and what that's like. So Jacob, thank you so much for being on the All Things Narrative podcast. I will put in the show notes links to the things you mentioned as well, of where to find you on YouTube. Probably won't put your phone number in there, but don't want you to, hopefully nobody spams you or anything. But so people can get connected with you. And I definitely want to have you on again. And if you haven't already, those listening, I got to be on Jacob's channel as well, and I'm sure we'll have more conversations, because it's just fantastic. It's great. It's one of the great things about the internet, is that you can find people and just connect with them so easily. So thank you, Jacob, for making that possible for people.
Thank you.
Don't forget to check out that Patreon page that's in the show notes. Just getting that up and running. But if you want to support what I'm doing here at All Things Narrative, check that out. Thank you so much, and until next time, take care.